then you'll do it one more time. So 3 times of that entire cycle, and again, you're the one who's going to be facilitating this process. So we'll be reminding you, have you done your coaching cycle, but you really need to be the one who's pushing this forward. And our hope is that this sort of just becomes a way of thinking for you, that you're just a reflective teacher, you realize when things aren't going well, you have tools and resources for going to get ideas and strategies, and you can implement them and make adjustments to your teaching as you need to. Let me stop there for a second. Do you have questions about the coaching cycle? Okay.
For special ed, do we have to do that, like 2 different ones?
No, so you'll do 3 the whole time, and you can choose whether you do those in your 10-week placement or your 5, or 2 in your 10-week placement maybe, and 1 in your 5-week placement. That's up to you. Good question. What other questions do you have?
And I'll send you the link to this form online, or you print it out. Either way is fine.
Yes.
And there it is.
If there is a severe situation in your student teaching and there's an issue where we need to intervene, we do have a process in place for that. So, maybe you're struggling in one area and the coaching cycle really doesn't help, and you're struggling enough that you need some more intervention from the university. We do have a process for a formal intervention. There is a form you can see, it's in the handbook, a formal intervention process form, but that would basically just be a meeting with you, your cooperating teacher, and your supervisor, and probably Ms. Bandy, maybe Dr. Campbell, somebody else, whoever needs to get involved. If it comes to that point where we need to have an intervention, some outcomes of that meeting would be, hey, it was great, and we gave you the support you needed, and you were able to improve that area of concern. Or we may need to put you on some sort of monitoring plan to say, okay, we're going to check in every week and make sure that you're doing what you need to do here. Could result in a change of placement. Sometimes there's not a good match, and sometimes you don't really know it's not a good match until you're out there every day. So you never really know how it's going to go until you get out there full time. And there have been some cases where it may end in termination of your student teaching. We certainly don't foresee that happening, but we do have to communicate with you up front that we have a process. We want this to be a successful experience for everyone, but we do have a process in place to give you the support you need to make it a successful experience if you're struggling in some way. Okay, video montage. So for the video montage, you're going to record each of your work sample lessons. So each of your 10 lessons or your 15 lessons, you're going to videotape the whole thing, all of your lessons. You're going to have so much video footage. What you have to do then is go through and edit that down to about a 20 to 30 minute video sample, montage of your entire work sample. So 20 to 30 minutes full. So you're going to have 2 or 3 minute clips from each of your lessons. You really need evidence of each of your lessons in this montage in order that kind of show the progression of your work sample. What you want to do here is showcase your teaching. So this is a chance for you to show what an awesome job you're doing as a teacher. So you want to show off, where things are going really well. You want to show a variety of teaching styles. So you may want to show some direct instruction. You may show some small group work. You may show some one-on-one time. You may show students working on something collaboratively. So that you can show you have a variety of instructional strategies in this unit. And you also want to sort of show that students have actually learned over the unit. So we should be able to watch, over time, the students are going from knowing less to knowing more about whatever the thing is that you're teaching them. So you're going to put together this montage, you're going to edit it, put it all together, and you're going to upload it to TaskStream for evidence 3. Now the hardest part with the montage is the editing and compressing, because TaskStream only allows a certain file size. They actually just increased that a lot, so I'm hoping it won't be as big of an issue this year as it has been in the past. But around April, when you are finishing up all your work sample pieces, you're tying everything together, and you're editing that montage, you can come see me, and I'm happy to help you work through that. You bring your computer to my office and hang out. So April, I will have a lot of you in my office, I'm sure. I have some tip sheets that I can email to you when it gets closer to time to help you work through some of the editing stuff on your own. But if you struggle with that, certainly I don't want you to be frustrated, so come see me and we'll work on it. Okay, so let's talk about the assessment piece of your work sample a little bit more. So you have this pre and post assessment that you need to have in your work sample. You give the pre-test, then you teach the unit, and then you give the post-test. Now there's a struggle here with having to plan this out so far in advance in order to turn it in and give feedback, and then also wanting to be responsive to your students. So I realize that there's a conflict there, and we kind of have to do it the way we're doing it. We have to have a deadline for you to get this stuff in. But also you have to show that when you get these pre-test results back, you're responsive to that. So at some point in your unit, some things may be tweaked when the time comes. And you should definitely do that. You need to be responsive to your students. So then you also have the assessment analysis that I mentioned a moment ago. The purpose of this whole assessment piece is you want to assess student progress toward the goals you've set. So in your rationale of your work sample, you're going to say, these are my learning outcomes. These are the goals I want students to master. So you have to assess how well do they know that before, and how well do they know that after my unit of instruction. Also, part of this evidence is you showing us that you can actually analyze this data and make sense of it, and then use it to adjust your teaching. And another piece of your analysis is how can you figure out what your students need next based on your data. So that happens really before and after. So you get this pre-test, and then you say, okay, I didn't know that half my students already knew this part, but now I know that they do, so I'm going to do some adjustments so that those half of the class don't have to sit through the teaching that they already know. Also, at the end, when you do your post-assessment, you're going to write up in your reflection, well, now that I have this data, if I were to keep teaching, this is what I would do next. So you need to show us that you can determine what students would need after the assessment. The work sample is not just something to check off, obviously. The idea here is that the data you get is driving your instruction. So let me show you some examples of assessment pieces that have been turned in the past for the work sample. And I'm going to try to help you think outside of the box when it comes to assessment. So it doesn't just have to be, multiple choice test, which is maybe what you're thinking. I need to give them a multiple choice test about fractions. Sam was talking about fractions earlier. Give them a multiple choice test about fractions at the beginning and at the end. Part of your assessment may have some multiple choice stuff, but it also may be a performance task. So maybe you're going to ask the students to do something with the content before, and then do something with the content after. Your pre-assessment and your post-assessment really need to match. Maybe even be the exact same thing. Because if they're very different, you're going to have a hard time telling us in your reflection that this change happened because of my teaching. So your assessment that you give before and your assessment that you give after really need to be pretty much the same thing. That'll help you out in your analysis. You can really say, this is where they were, and then 10 lessons later, this is where they are. So you want to be able to say that. If you do choose to include a performance task, a performance assessment, where you're actually asking students to do something with fractions, so give them some manipulatives, give them some fraction thing to work out, then you're going to want to include very specific instructions for that. So you wouldn't have a paper multiple choice test, but instead you would have your assessment plan. So here's how to deliver the performance task. And it needs to be detailed enough that Dr. Boehner could walk in and give your fractions assessment just as well as you could. So that may be a piece of your evidence 5. And here's what your data analysis might look like. So there are so many possibilities. When you get into analyzing your data, it really depends on what your assessment looks like. Whether it's a multiple choice or some sort of performance task will determine what your analysis looks like. But this is just an example of how someone turned in her analysis of the assessment data. So she did a performance task on positional words. So this was a primary grades assessment. And assess whether they knew